everything on? Nothing muted? Hi, here we are again. As you may have heard, slight technical difficulties. Today we have Denise with us, Denise Magicamente Muir, a Scottish lady, a traveller at heart, and you have been, after you studied in Glasgow, you've been travelling all over the world and ended up in Italy. Do you want to say it in your own words so no, we're not getting it wrong? And like I said, this whole day, like our chat today, will be about storytelling, which is a very important thing in Scottish nature, culture, and you're a big part of it, and we would like to highlight that.
I guess it kind of goes back to, I like to tell myself stories, and when I graduated, I hadn't quite found out what my own story was, so I took myself off working in the States, working in Cyprus, working in Germany, and ended up in Italy teaching English, basically because of a story I told one night at a party in Glasgow, and was given some information, was told that there was a job available in Italy, and I thought, well, that sounds like an interesting next chapter, so I shall just head off to Italy and start teaching English, which was in 1993, and here I am, a few years later, and my connection with Italy basically has provided me a book, husband, child, history, profession, everything really.
And in the chat we had earlier, you were talking, well, we both agreed that traveling is the best way to actually learn about cultures, and also the culture obviously always influenced the storytelling. So your main insight is into Italian storytelling as compared to maybe Scottish storytelling. Do you want to quickly go into how that's different and why that made you who you are now? Because that's why you chose your current profession, isn't it?
I think basically for the first few years in Italy, I was fine. I had a job. I was sufficient in what I had around about me. When I had a child and my world changed, I suddenly had time inside my own head to look around me and think, the things I have in my head, the stories that I brought with me from Scotland, what families are like, what mother-in-laws should be like, what life should be like as a parent with a young child, suddenly clashed completely with what I was finding around about me in Italy. And I suddenly, you hear talk about culture clash. It really was a clash in my head. The two things just went head to head to head. So the only thing I really know how to do is read books to fill my time, go to libraries. So that's what I did. I went out into the community. I tried to set up a toddlers group, and I just sat down and I thought, I'll read stories. So then I looked for stories in Italian, because that's what the bookshops were, and I couldn't find things that reflected what I thought children's stories should be like. So then I started to try and get my English books, and I would translate them into Italian and tell those stories. And gradually the two started to mingle. I started to learn more about Italian children's literature, and obviously more conversations were being had. And I suddenly realised what was brilliant about Scotland, which I missed. There was a whole new world in Italy that I hadn't discovered, the heartfelt stories, the emotional stories, as compared to the funny, quirky, zany ones. And that just opened up a whole new world to me.
Yeah. So we because I had friends who stayed in Italy for a long time, and they always said, that the parents' phone calls are every day, and they always ask you, "What have you eaten?" So, how much of a foodie experience was your life in Italy? And we also need to kind of touch on how that gradually over time you wound down your life down there, even though you still have a house there, don't you? And you're mainly living here now, so you're still in both worlds, isn't it? So how much did you bring back from your Italian world to here, and how much did you bring from your Scottishness over to Italy?
I think just touching on the food issue, we've talked about both books and stories are a great way of bringing people together, which is conversation, it's communication, and the Italians are very good at that. Food is the next one. You learn about food is essential to everything that happens, So all, people get together, they talk about food, they make food, and the amount of stories that exist around food as well. As a translator in my early days, that's all I did, was I translated the folklore, the tradition, the recipes around Italian food. And I was like, gradually, I did learn to cook the odd thing. And I learned to use it as a way of getting people to my house, to start up conversations when you don't know what to say to people. As you mentioned, what you cooking today? What did you have for dinner yesterday? You know, where did you get your fresh fennel this week? Did you get it from this shop, that shop? So yeah, I brought that back to Scotland, and in our house, food is really important now. And it's one of the things I miss the most. You know, in September we go out and we the roasted chestnuts, and we drink the new wine. And when the fennel comes out, when the strawberries come out in sort of March, April, I miss all those things. You know, I haven't quite found ways to replace them here in Scotland. You know, so that is one of the major things we talk about. We have 30-kilo boxes of food sent over to us regularly.
So
I think the one picture we do have, I think they look like little donuts.
We'll show a picture now, like, because obviously we've been talking about food now for quite a while. So these, they are like
a little custard donut.
Yeah, they're. Gosh, I wish my husband was here with me now. And I'm a bit nervous. I probably don't remember all the names of things. They come out, I think it's San Giuseppe. I think these come out for you get various sizes of donuts, and I picked the one that I like the most. There's lots of different variations of that one donut, but oh my gosh, I would cycle. I would get on my running shoes and run along to the bakers to buy those. You know, so I'd be using up some calories to be able to eat even more when I came back.
And then we have a couple of photos of the folklore. So there was a snake festival which looked really interesting. We're trying to find the picture as we speak. So what was that all about?
That's San Domenico, Saint Domenico. That's a little village about maybe an hour from ours in Abruzzo, and he's meant to be the patron saint of snakes. Mm-hmm. And you go to this tiny village and once a year, and the whole village will be filled with people holding snakes, because obviously everything has a religious basis to it in Italy. So for some reason, this patron saint protected the village from some invasion of snakes.
We messed up. We don't have the picture. We'll have to post it afterwards underneath. Let's see if we can quickly find it, because we did have it there.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. 2 seconds. We'll open this for you.
Here
we go. You holding snakes. Very brave of you. Yeah, they're like really nice to touch, aren't they?
Yeah, I think you can tell from my face. I was a little bit kind of.
You're definitely.
But that was a school trip in primary school. My daughter's primary school in Italy took them to the snake festival, which I thought was quite unique.
So how is your daughter finding the differences, having obviously grown up in Italy with Italian language around her, now being here? I also assume, my Italian is broken, but it's more colorful as a language, isn't it? It's very, lyrical in a sense.
Yeah. I think, again, I have this whole yin and yang view of the world, perhaps because I'm a Gemini, I don't know. But when we were there, it was wonderful. And then we got a bit disillusioned with it, and Scotland was everything. But now we're back in Scotland. I think it's given her and myself the opportunity to get some perspective and get some balance. There's some beautiful things there which remain with us in our hearts.
We're showing the picture of you in front of the mountains with your daughter there, yeah.
So and so she has perspective now. She looks around her, and it's given her this ability to assess and say, okay, this is really good here. I didn't have this in my life in Italy, but she misses a few different things, but because we've kept our ties and our bonds with Italy, and she gets the best of both worlds, as people say. So yes. it does, it's a whole bilingual thing as well. You've got insights into two different ways of doing things.
Absolutely. So you started translating books when you were in Italy, and you actually did it both ways. So you translated into Italian first.
For my own purposes, I never to publish, because I wouldn't dream of being able to publish in Italian. I speak it and write it well. It was for use at our local events.
Yeah. All right. Okay, that makes sense. And then, because something you said really touched me. The way how you said that you mentioned it earlier, that Italian children's books are all about connections and love and emotion. Do you want to say that again, because you said it so much nicer than I could ever say it?
what I noticed was I was reading books in Italy and they just were so profound. They touch on themes, whether it's death, whether it's identity, whether it's diversity, whether it's inclusiveness, that I felt, I'm talking 15 years ago now, weren't always dealt with in English, because it was more that we have to entertain young children, we have to make them laugh, and the colours and the quirky illustrations. Whereas I was looking at books that had very profound illustrations in the European tradition that you might think, are very adult. And I started to look into them, and I thought they just leave you, they touch your heart when you read the stories, and I am particularly drawn to message fiction, so books that leave a message, or springboards for conversations you can have with young people when they're building their own identities. I just thought it was beautiful, and it's a way to make the world a better place.
Absolutely.
Not just to laugh and have fun in the world, to do both.
So there's one book cover you just literally sent us before we started chatting. So we'll show that. Tell us about that book, because obviously that meant a lot to you, didn't it?
Do you mean the one called The Tree Story, the Tree of Stories? L'Albero delle Storie?
Yes,
that's the one.
Yeah. Okay, this book, I have it here with me as well. It's called The Tree of Stories, and it really struck me because it was published in 2015, and it was something I was trying to do way back in like 2006. Is a young boy who has come to Milan from Africa, part of the whole kind of, the movement of people, immigration, the migrants or crisis, was in a grey part of Milan on the outskirts, was missing home, was missing Africa, so he picked a tree. And he sat down and tried to replicate what his grandfather did before him in Africa, and told stories about his past, about his home, and tried to encourage people to sit down with him and all to tell their own stories. And I just thought it's such a beautiful metaphor for life, a way of sharing our experiences with people and sort of bridging those gaps and filling an empty hour when we've got, at the moment we're all stuck in our houses and we don't really have much to do. We get together and we tell each other our stories.
Yes, exactly.
So that was really important.
And that is the storytelling. Yes, it's very live in the Italian culture, I'm sure, but definitely the Scots have a thing about that. They used to do that in the black houses as well. They always sat together. After a day's work, they would sit together, and usually it was the tailor, wasn't it, who told the stories, and then everyone else would pick up and tell their story. So that's how kind of. Well, I think all around the world it was the same. How do you teach your children what your parents did, what your grandparents did, what the grandparents before that did, so that you kind of give your view of life towards them, but they can obviously add what they think as well. So it's a lovely way of like you are saying, teaching children. So this book, yes.
No, I often tell the story when I talk about literature translation. I was never much of a student at school for history and geography. I really wasn't. I liked other things, and I always found, and I've done this with my daughter, even here back in Scotland. I've taken her to the Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh so often, because it's such a live way of finding out of what happens in other parts of the world and historical events. It's just sitting down and hearing somebody telling you about them. You go around the pubs in Edinburgh now, or the various children's events, and it's so much easier for me to absorb other cultures in that way than to have to read them in a textbook.
That's true.
When you look at culture all around the world, it was always history. Everything was passed on by voice, by storytellers.
Yeah.
That's how. We didn't have Twitter and Facebook and internet and newspapers or anything like that. It was through stories. You look at all the way back through. You go through the ancient Celtic Pictish cultures. Most of the history we don't have, because it was all done through word of mouth. They didn't have written text, so it was all sitting around campfires.
I love this. I love to talk, as you might have noticed. I'm a bit of a chatter, and I love that. I love to listen to people talking. I love to talk myself, and all my work is basically just filtering through and trying to share what I've learned and trying to get back from other parts of the world what other colleagues of mine have learned, whether it's from Poland or Mexico or wherever. I want to read their stories, or hear them tell me about them.
Yeah. That's totally true. And this is kind of for the same reason that we started this show, because we thought, well, most of us, we're all kind of stuck inside, for most of the time. We can't travel and experience life, what other cultures are like. So that's why we need to bring it to the households in a different way. So this is why I loved when Pilar was kind of recommending to speak to you, because you do it in a different way to us, but through children's books, which is a wonderful thing. So you're now a part of a group, the Scottish Translation Group. I hope I don't say it wrong. And you're obviously translating, so you're all native English speakers, I suppose, and you're translating most of you. Okay, so and it's but basically you're translating world books into English.
Yeah.
We have the Translation Scotland poster up that was for the first event you had. Tell us about that, please.
Again, it goes back to, you'll see, I think the key words we have in that poster, I don't have it in front of me, besides diversity, inclusion and sharing. We came up with the idea that, Scotland has a rich culture of translators, colleagues of mine who bring stories into English, and there's a lot of small publishers in Scotland trying to get Scottish stories out into other languages and around the world. And we thought translators are in quite a lucky position that we have one foot in our source language culture. So for me, that's Italy. For other colleagues, it could be Norway, could be France, could be Spain. So, and we can pass on the information that we're getting from our source languages to Scottish publishers. So perhaps we might want to suggest them stories that we'd like to see in English, but we can take their stories across to all our contacts in these other countries and try to create collaborations or opportunities or joint ventures to share what we're doing, to try, it works both ways. I want to work into English, but I want to help the publishers I work with to get their work out of English as well.
Yeah, obviously we have a mutual friend, Vinit, who we're trying to get onto the show as well, because he's doing French translations, so that might be really interesting. And yes, like I worked with Vinit at Visit Scotland, so that is even more so interesting to see that that's such a big and flourishing group, which is starting to come up with something. So we've got a couple of books. Shall we talk about the books first, or maybe shall we talk about your exchanges as well? So that was quite a funny story, actually. Let's show that one of the Scouts. So we have the one in front of the Parliament.
Okay.
So how did that come about? You had Italian Scouts, right? Well, students as well, but like they were Scouts coming to visit here.
I'm not very good at being stuck at home doing nothing, because as much as I work at home all day, I love working with young people. So in Italy, I got involved with a secular scout group, not the one that's affiliated with the church in Italy. Got involved with this group again, this idyllic sort of view I have of the world and trying to make the world a better place, working with young people. And I love to share things. So I said, how about we have our next summer trip in Scotland? We connected with a scout group in Granton in Edinburgh. We spent a week in Lochte, and then I brought the Italians to Edinburgh. And before we came to Edinburgh, I of course wanted to share all the beautiful things about Scotland with them. So, some of the older students, the 16, 17-year-olds, we gave them little tasks. They had to do a little bit of research on some of the literature that's on the stones on the wall at the side of the Parliament. One of the students in the picture had done some research about the legend behind Arthur's Seat. And each of them, as we moved around Edinburgh, they stopped and gave presentations to the rest of the group on these aspects of Scottish and local culture and tradition. We went to Cramond, we went kind of all over, and it was just such a beautiful celebration in the rain of the best.
It had to be like that, yeah.
Has to offer. So they all took that away with them, so they all feel like a tiny little part of them now, is kind of Scottish. They're little honorary Scots, which I thought was...
Yeah, so for anyone who is, either Edinburgh resident or is about to visit Scotland, have a look at those little inscriptions on the side of Parliament, because there's literally quotes where you can kind of learn more about the historic background of Edinburgh, because Edinburgh obviously has UNESCO World Heritage for literature, given so many writers have either been born here or have lived here during their working times, or like from old times to even nowadays. We're still kind of very proud of J.K. Rowling being here, Ian Rankin living and working here, and people like you
Oh.
contributing to the storytelling culture we have. So we have a couple of book covers. So that was probably the most recent one. So we have the one which is called "My Name Is Not Refugee."
Oh gosh, beautiful project. This was an absolutely beautiful project. Italy was on the front line of the migrant crisis, and it was something that we experienced, firsthand in Italy, in our little village. And I felt it quite strongly volunteering in primary schools when I was out in Italy as well, because there were so many myths and things that had to be overcome. So this book, I discovered it. It's published by a Scottish publisher. I know Mary Kidd, who used to be the managing director of Barrington Stoke. And when she was there, she commissioned this book, My Name Is Not Refugee. And it's a gorgeous little story, sort of telling the life of a little girl who has to leave her home country, and she's with her mom and she's packing her case. But what I liked about it is the story talks to the reader all the time. What would you take? What would you do in that situation? So it's kind of two-way conversation. And I loved it so much. When I was out in Bologna at the book fair a few years ago, I went around all my contacts that I have to try and find a home for it in Italian. And it found a home almost immediately. And I think it's in its 8th reprint. It has sold so many copies in Italy because it's such a beautiful book. So again,
That
that's
sounds
just a little example of what translators can do, trying to work as a bridge between, two cultures.
Yeah, perfect. So we've got the distance between me and the cherry tree.
Oh gosh, now this is a book that came to me from a UK publisher, thanks to an important colleague that I have, Daniel Hahn. This is the story of an Italian author. It's kind of autobiographical. She was losing her sight, and she wrote this story about, I think it's a 12-year-old girl who's going through the same thing. She's beginning to lose her sight, and she measures the deterioration in her sight by the distance between her and her favourite cherry tree. The more she loses her sight, the closer she has to stand to the cherry tree to be able to see it. And it's just a really touching, moving story of this little girl, how she deals with it, how she wants to escape and actually just go away and live in the cherry tree and pretend that this whole horrible thing's not happening to her. And it's just moving. It's a moving, beautiful story that just, it just tingles when you read it.
And that is an Italian story that you translated into English.
Into English, yeah.
Wow,
the publisher
wonderful.
found it, and with the help of Daniel Hahn, I was suggested as a translator, and I got the translation, and I just lived in that between those pages for about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
I met the author. We did lots of events around the UK. Beautiful. It's what Italians do really well. It's just making your
skin tingle. Yeah, I can hear it. Like I can see it even. Okay, so the next one we have is the sun. The sun between. Sorry,
the fingers
between your fingers.
Yes,
of
course.
Sorry.
La dita. Yeah.
I'm sorry to harp on so much about this. I'm sure now there are just as many wonderful books in English, but I found this story, and I think it was published again about 5 years ago, based on a true experience. Boy in a wheelchair is kept kind of like in cotton wool. Nobody will let him out. Nobody will let him do anything until one teenager who has his own internal struggles decides to escape. And a kind of Thelma and Louise story with the boy in the wheelchair, because he wants to take the boy to the beach and show him the world. He may be in a wheelchair, but he has the same needs, the same emotions, the same feelings, the same sense of humor. And the journey the two of them go on is just amazing. They make it all the way to the beach, and he gets the sun through his fingers, and just the relationship that builds up between the two of them in the pages of the story, again, is really heartfelt.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's another thing we thought, once lockdown is back, like out of place, so to say, we want to start offering virtual tours or even take camera with us on tour, because my parents died last year, but like my mom was very immobile the last couple of years, but she still loved her traveling, so she wasn't able to travel. And we think, how can you bring the world closer to people who are not able to travel anymore? In this case, in a wheelchair, of course you can still travel, you just need different accessible scenarios. But some people literally cannot leave where they are, but they want to be somewhere. So it doesn't always have, yes, of course, being there, smelling it, tasting it is is the ultimate experience. But if you can't have that, there's always something in between which you can, and again, storytelling is half of the battle, isn't it? Half of the
They say a good book, a good writer is good because he evokes those exact same emotions, and a good translation as well is said to be because the translation evokes the same emotions as the original. You can do that through word, you can do it through picture, you can do it through voice, you can do it through image. It's quite easy to evoke those same sensations. So of course that would be a wonderful way to travel from your armchair.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, armchair traveler.
So what was your work with back in the UK now? You did some work with deaf children.
Yep, another book that I had the great fortune to work on. It doesn't exist in English as a publication, but the English translation exists. It was through an organisation called Outside In World, who tried to promote international literature and translation, and they have a particular interest in diverse books. So this book, I worked with the author, is the book about, again, Italian food.
Yeah, pasticceria zitti.
It's the story of a deaf pastry chef who makes these little pastries, and it's a local tradition in Italy. On a Sunday, you go down to the pastry shop, you buy your tray of pastries, you take them home, you sit them on the table, everybody sits around the table, you chat, you have your pastry, you share. So he basically does this in a town which has lost all ability to communicate because they're all rushing here, rushing there, people in their horns, factories. But when they take these pastries home, there's a little bit of the chef's silence inside them. And when they put them on the table, the silence falls in the home and they begin to listen to each other again. So we used this story in a school down in near Southampton, I think. And we worked with these children. We portrayed the story to them. We kind of read it, we sort of acted it a little bit, and then we had a little workshop afterwards when they made biscuits. Then they each had to put something of themselves, a little secret, into the biscuit and write it on a sheet of paper, which they then gave to the person who they gave their biscuit to afterwards, a little sort of secret thought or gift they were given to another child. It was beautiful.
Yeah, but it's also a cultural exchange as well. It's dealing with the difficulty you have and how someone else has dealt with it. And just those little things can help. It could sort of expose someone to either to finding another way to communicate or getting them in touch with using their hands to cook. You don't need ears to cook.
Exactly.
It's all your other senses, it's your taste, it's your smell, it's your feel, that you don't need hearing to cook. So you can get through your passion and express yourself that way. So I think that was a perfect way of helping kids sort of with that.
Yeah. I just love the idea of communication is not just related to a word on a page. Communication is this massive 360-degree thing, which seems quite obvious, when we all start gesticulating things. But I love to do that in classrooms. I've done it in Italy. I've worked with autistic children who read in a different way. They use different symbols, and it's just as long as you get the message and the feelings across, then you're communicating.
Yeah. Well, we're almost running out of time already. I think we have touched on almost everything we wanted to touch on. Otherwise, we'll have to do another show. So we kind of did want to end on kind of pointing out again the Translation Scotland project, because they have a new project they're working on, which it's close to your heart and you really wanted to get it out there. So just let's put up the Translation Scotland poster again. And you tell us what about that project you were saying.
I don't know all the details. I just heard through my colleague Vinit, who you mentioned earlier. Vinit is part of various cultural and arts associations in Scotland, and I was made aware that there's a project coming in the future which will revolve around the Scottish Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh, and there'll be buildings sort of regenerated in the area around the Storytelling Centre on the Royal Mall to create a literary community, a sort of literary village in Edinburgh, which will become the basis, of a new tourist offer to attract people to Edinburgh. And when I was speaking to one of the people who's involved in the project, I myself am about to move into secondary teaching next year, and I really, really, really want to be able to get involved, to get young people in that literary village, and listening and creating and being part of stories of whatever kind, and also the cross-cultural aspect, getting international stories in there, getting Italian children in there, you know, to create a sort of nice big mixing pot of stories.
Yeah. So I can totally see it working, because like when you told us about how you had the Italian scouts, you know, read out little bits of along the walls of the parliament, this is literally similar to that, isn't it? That you kind of go through little points of Edinburgh, and again, it's not hard to find them because there's so many points of interest where a literate would have lived, or something interesting would have happened that kind of then inspired a certain story. And if you then just plug into that and just tell the story right there, right then, and there's a million and one ways to be doing that. So that's just amazing. And the Translation Scotland project kind of tries to tie in the internationalness of it all, you know, just kind of not just be insular Edinburgh people talking about Edinburgh history, rather than actually talking to anyone else and bringing their stories in as well.
I should mention that the Translation Scotland project, there's 4 of us. I just represent the Italian side of it, for generally for younger readers. We have a very, very well eminent translator from Norwegian, from Spanish, and Vinique from French, and Lucinda Baia also from Italian. Does a different type of literature. Some very eminent, well-known people across Edinburgh. I'm just a small fry.
We're always just a small cog, but like we all work for the bigger picture, which is amazing. So yes, we'll definitely call Vinit up on that one and make sure that he talks about the bigger project as a whole. And you are also writing short stories at the moment, aren't you?
Oh gosh, yes. I work with an author in Italy who writes for young adults, and when she went into lockdown on the 9th of March, her way of coping with it was to just, her mind went mad, her creative mind went mad, and she's been churning, that sounds derogatory, she's been producing a story a day, virus themed, and they kind of map what she's hearing in the media and her own, you know, frame of mind.
Yeah.
Through the pandemic. So she's written 4 weeks of stories, 28 stories so far.
Wow.
Which I'm trying to get across into English, because apparently she's found a publisher, somebody who wants to publish them in English on paper, not just on Amazon.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're busy doing that.
Okay.
Quite dramatic, some of the stories.
So you're kind of busy at the moment, even though you're kind of confined to your four walls, mostly. We just said, okay, we'll stop. We'll fade out on, because we've shown, we need to show one more picture of Italy, don't we? That, like, just the 2 things, how like it, you know, you lived near to a outdoor life hiking, I suppose. Yeah. You lived near to we saw that. Yeah. And then the skiing picture. Yeah. And then there's the one where you walk with cows.
There's all cows coming down through the village.
So like, you know, the contrast of where you lived in Italy and what's your view out of the window now, which is still very green. And obviously Edinburgh has you were saying your husband being Italian, he actually really loves living in Edinburgh because the vibe is not too far off from what he's used to. Obviously, you know, sunshine or like warmth wise is never similar.
Edinburgh is a city, but sometimes it feels like villages within a city as well. I don't know if that reflects other people's experience of Edinburgh. It's how I feel.
Yeah.
You know, Edinburgh's lots of little villages, but it's this wonderful city as well, with, you know, the heart, Arthur's Seat at its heart, you know, and Princess Street. So he's quite happy. Again, we have the best of both worlds. We have our quaint sort of little village life in Italy, and we have all the beauty that Edinburgh is here.
Yeah. You know what, like me being German from a huge city as in Berlin, I love here, and because of the same reasons you mentioned, I love the connections. It's so easy to make a connection here, and you've got outdoor life, you've got city life, you've got the best of both worlds, and it's not too big, too crowded. So yeah, so I can relate to that absolutely. Yeah. Well, Denise, thank you so much for being here today. It was such a pleasure to talk to you again, because I had the pleasure to speak to you beforehand. We shall absolutely watch your projects now and make sure we see all your lovely stories. And we'll both give Vinit a call so that we can talk about the Translation Scotland project going forward.
Thank you very much to both you, Beryl and John. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
No,
and complimenti.
Grazie, mille grazie.
Yeah.
A dopo. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
So thanks a lot for tuning in with us. We'll see you on Thursday at 3 o'clock.
Yes.
We have a very good friend of ours who we will let you know. If you keep your eye on the site, we'll let you know who's popping in on Thursday for a chat. So make sure you drop by then. And until then, keep your eye out. We're going to be putting photos. We went for a nice walk yesterday up Carlton Hill and took lots of lovely photos there as well. So we'll just be putting a few of them up on Facebook, on Instagram. So just keep your eye out. We're going to be putting lots of lovely photos up, not only from around Edinburgh, from all around Scotland, just to keep your appetite going for when we are released and you can come and hang out with us. Okay, so until Thursday, we'll see you later.
Mm-hmm.